Ready to hit the pause button on your parenting fails? Ready to feel better about your parenting? Welcome to Parenting Pause, the podcast, where all of you is welcome and where you can listen in on how other parents became the parents they always dreamed of being. I'm Leslie Potter, the founder of the Pure Joy Parenting Way. I'm a mother, a parenting coach, and a fellow traveler on this journey to wake up in our parenting. And I believe together we can make this a better world for ourselves and our kiddos. Today I'm welcoming Maryrose, a mom to one son, age 12. Maryrose reached out to me for support with her son who had experienced early trauma and had difficulty expressing his anxiety without acting out in an aggressive way. Since she had been raised to be a pleaser and caregiver, it was challenging for her to understand his way of caring for himself. Her love for herself and her son opened the door to understand how trauma could play out in the parent-child relationship and how she could step up to the plate in a new, empowering way. Hello, love. Thank you for being with me today.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very honored to be here and do this work with you.
So, what was going on in your home when you reached out?
We were sort of a newly forming family in a way. My son and I were getting into sometimes conflicts, but certainly I was having the experience of not understanding him and not understanding why all my books that I'd read and even my own therapeutic work didn't seem to be there for me when I was in a moment of feeling overwhelmed. And some of the moments that would feel overwhelming to me, probably the most overwhelming, would always happen in public. And so I have had a relationship with my son for his whole life, but I just adopted him 2 years ago. And in the lead up to that adoption, I had been married about a year before that. And so we were kind of forming a new family, at least new in terms of having really clear structure and relationships. And in that context, I experienced some change in my own perception and other people's perceptions about my responsibility for my son's behaviors when we were with other people.
Did you have a fantasy of the wonderful home, right? I get married, my son comes in, and it all works out?
Maybe not so much of the wonderful home, but I definitely had an expectation of my child's not going to be biting me and my child's not going to be biting my new wife. And so, yes, I did. I had a fantasy that things would be easeful and that after a period of transition, we would settle into trusting each other and feeling safe together.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring that forth because I think so many of us, you have a different situation because you had known him all your life, but adopted him only a couple of years ago and you were creating this new family. So I can only imagine, the hope that creating the container would create a beautiful space for him. And I know that wasn't actually what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that because that helps me to pull out. You're right. I really did think I can create this for him and then it will be a new way. And what I experienced is my son is on the autism spectrum and has plenty of atypical behavior. He's certainly like a neurodivergent kid. And creating that container of our home in some ways created a space that was safe enough for him to really bring all of his fears. Yeah, it was exactly what I was expecting. And that's the work I've been doing for the last few years because I've gotten to see how my own repressed material, the feelings that I didn't even think I had or that I thought I'd really the feelings I've managed my whole life. So anger, rage, intense panic, those feelings that I've really managed so well that I thought I didn't even have them have just come forward in the field of my home. And then I've gotten to feel them.
That was what I like to tell people. That's usually what happens. And I know feelings of rejection and abandonment were in there also.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh,
before you
yeah.
started doing this work, how were you trying to manage all of that?
This is where the real fantasy for me comes in. I thought if I provide this sort of safe, loving context for him, then his behavioral challenges and maybe even some of his just differences will go away or ease. And my son also has experienced some significant trauma. And so I think I had a sort of work plan approach, like applying my professional skills. I know how to solve problems and kind of look at the situation and break it down into bite-sized chunks and, get the help I need and all of that. And I think that the most significant benefit of doing this work with you has been turning in towards myself. So really owning that I really have all I need inside of myself for my own safety.
Yes. Well, it's so powerful because this was a little bit of my story too. I'd done all this work and I thought, oh, I can help this child, right? That is
Mm-hmm.
struggling. And then all of a sudden I found myself underwater. All right, because everything I was trying to do was not helping, it was actually exacerbating it, and all of a sudden, there I was finding that I was the one that was feeling the rage and the intensity and misbehaving in my mind, right? I was the one that was
Mm-hmm.
acting out, and it was such a revelation and a shock, and so much guilt and shame, began to arise. So I love how you're describing this is that the power of having an atypical child or a child even that has trauma is that you will be pulled into the field also.
Yeah, yeah. And the initial thing that was so intolerable that made me start to reach out and look for support was the shame inside of me of realizing that I was orienting towards strangers' feelings. If I could, I wanted to make everybody happy all the time, right? But then I'd be in situations where I felt like I would orient towards other adults' expectations or even other kids' expectations about my son's behavior and sort of abandon him around non-typical comments. I remember one before my wife and I were married, we were at a relative's graduation party, and my son said to an important relative, "Why are you so big?" I was
Mm.
like, ah, and it was just like he didn't mean it in any offensive way at all. He doesn't follow the social rules. Oftentimes, that's part of his charm. I can really see the beauty in it now. And there was enough good humor, and he was young enough, honestly, at that time that I think that situation went okay. But I think of that because even though I hid it completely, nobody knew I was feeling any shame, right? But inside of myself, I was kind of beating myself up, like I need to somehow prep him, or I need to help control and manage him so that he's not embarrassing himself, and so that people continue to like him.
Yeah, so it sounds like so much was going on inside of you. And of course, like most of us, you were trained to look at the external, to think
Yeah.
that the external was causing it. So I've got to get this external shifted, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then the more contemporary, fast forward a few years, and the work that I've been doing, in the last year more recently is my intense boundaries work and looking at the responsibility I have to take care of myself. And, one of the things that you've said that I love and repeat often is that I want to take care of myself so well that I don't feel resentful towards the other, and for me, that other is usually a partner of some kind. And it's another version of that externalizing, thinking if I manage or change what's outside of me, that will resolve my own needs.
So, what does that look like? Maybe you could give us an example of that because that is such a prevalent tendency, I believe, for especially a lot of mamas.
Well, I'll say one example of that in relationship to my son is making the decision to clear everything sharp out of our house. So at a time when he, had used a hammer a thrown hammer, like using tools in ways that really could hurt. I realized, like, yeah, I want to keep giving him access to his shop because he loves it and it's healthy and productive as an activity for him and all these good reasons. But when I was able to go in and listen to my boundary is if somebody throws a heavy metal object in my direction, I'm going to move those things away and have them live in a safe place for a while until I know that I'll be safe.
But how beautiful. I mean, again, let's go back to our typical response would be to punish or consequence the child.
Mm-hmm.
So, how beautiful
Right.
that you took responsibility as the adult to realize that my child, for whatever reason, is not able to handle that heavy object. So, I'm going to put it away until he is.
I think if I'd really been listening to my boundaries, I may have made different choices even in setting that situation up.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's a big growing edge for me, saying no, or this doesn't work for me. Like pretty much anything that I know is going to disappoint someone I love is very hard for me to do it and say it. And what I've gotten to is even if it's messy, even if the other person is right in saying I did it wrong or I said it in an offensive way, that I now can find my bottom line and I can find my own truth and speak from it and act from it. And just this week, I've been doing a lot of speaking with a shaky voice and not doing it perfect. And still, I can feel the huge difference in me that I actually can find the boundary inside of myself as opposed to being very confused about trying to manage a situation to make everybody happy. And in that kind of context, it's usually thinking, well, she's not happy about this part. She's not happy about this part. I'm not happy about this part, but we all are getting some of our needs met. And I've sort of reached a tipping point of wanting joy and ease and to be able to feel those things authentically, realizing I have to also be willing to feel the rage and pain and stay with it.
Right. Whoa.
I know.
I mean, this is the
Oh,
power of the work. It's counterinstinctual, right? Who wants to turn toward that rage and that intensity? Like, as you said, I've organized most of my life. You said to not feel that by being a pleaser, by
mhm,
taking care of others' needs, by always giving and not receiving. And to actually have the courage, my dear, that's what I hear at this moment, the courage
mhm.
to turn back toward that part of yourself that so needs that unconditional love and presence. Yes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel emotional just hearing you
Yeah.
talk about that way because it's very tender and I do love myself very much and I'm so grateful to be able to be with myself when I'm feeling young and when I'm tender and be able to grow myself up, and as needed to parent, but then to come back to my young self a little later or sometimes share that with my wife and say, you know, my little girl was here today and really needs to stay in the room for a little while, but now I need to go spend some time with myself. And that's pretty recent, I think, for me to be able to take care of my own feelings and be with my own feelings alone instead of asking a partner to take care of my feelings. I'd say in the past, I've really had an orientation of like, I take care of everybody all the time. And so if I have a need, you better take care of me. Or like I deserve somebody to take care of me because I take care of others so much.
Well, you're talking
But
about
within,
the safe seat process. So speak
yes,
to us a
yep,
little bit about what that's been like for you.
yeah. Well, when I first started working with you, a close friend of mine had been telling me about it for a little bit, and I knew because I'd been, at her house that she had a chair, and there was like, a sign on the wall that said "safe seat," and there was some kind of probably quotes from you. Yeah, that was my ideal. So for the first few months, I was really thinking like I just couldn't find a place. And then when I had the aha of like the places inside of me, and so often when I was getting triggered and needed a safe seat, I wasn't home. It took a bit for me to be brave enough to just let him do whatever he was doing that other people thought was inappropriate or that I felt was, lateness was certainly an issue for us, to be like, I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm not going to make him get in trouble because I am playing out the same story over and over again. So that's one of the places that I really was able to start to do a lot of safe sitting, was getting in the car in the morning and saying, if he's taking a little longer, I'm just going to stand here, or I'm going to actually sit down. Even though that maybe says to him, we're not in a rush, that I pause and sit down and just be with my feelings, put my hand on my heart, say, you're not in trouble. Talk to
What
my really afraid one.
Yeah, well, what you're describing, you
Yeah.
begin to not abandon yourself, which is what you were trained to do as a young child,
Mm-hmm.
because that was your survival mechanism, was to abandon yourself to take care of others. It was so beautiful as a child. And yet
Mm-hmm.
now as an adult, as you say, you are making so many people think like you think, like, well, I'm teaching him that he can be late, or I'm teaching. No, it's not about him. What he's doing is taking care of himself by sitting down. And then you chose not to abandon the feelings, the reactions that were coming up in you, and began to turn back inward toward yourself.
Yeah, and I now can hope for him that through my doing this work, he will eventually have the lived experience or the example of seeing me slow down, and also seeing me be able to set a boundary and take care of myself.
Very, very powerful, especially for kids that are a little bit more atypical and don't read the social cues so well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our traditional parenting is all about setting all these limits and boundaries and regulations and rules, and then if our kids don't live into them, then we'll punish or consequence them to try to get them to get it. But often atypical kids or kids on the spectrum, they don't get that social cue. They don't get it. They do get it energetically. I can promise you, and I know you know that, right? They get it in spades on an energetic level, but often on an external visual level or socially, it's really hard for them to get. And you're describing where I could show it on the external, but I wasn't living it energetically.
Yeah, I think that's a really huge change point for me. And really managing and giving the appearance of, and I've got it all under control throughout my whole career. That's been a really strong thread. And in work environments, you get really rewarded for that. People are like, great, you've got it all under control. That's what we need. And in a parenting context, as you're saying, the energy and the youngness is really real. And what matters is the relationship. And I think being able to orient towards my son feeling seen by me, and I mean, really being able to see myself, that's, I'd say, the most beautiful positive consequence, is that it's given me new eyes to be able to also see him. And particularly around, because I'm right in it right now around the boundaries work, I just feel like he's been such a teacher to me, to say, I'm going to keep trying to get my needs met. Even if it's inappropriate, even if people get angry at me, I'm going to keep on making noise until I feel safe. I can see the young part of me that didn't do that, that chose a totally different strategy, the strategy of being really accommodating and sweet and making sure that I made myself needed.
And what a smart
Yeah,
strategy as a
yeah.
child, right?
Right.
To survive in your family, and yet as an adult and a parent, right? It doesn't work so well because it puts your son in the position of being the parent, which is not
Mm-hmm.
the position we want our children to be in.
Yeah, so I'd say, after the first intense year, year and a half of work, that things between me and my son, we experienced like a long stretch, maybe a year of a lot of ease and joy and connection. And not that there was not dysregulation and challenge that happened, but how I was able to be with myself during that dysregulation was really of a different quality, a quality that kept me more present so that the stories didn't take over about what was going to happen in the future because of this, or if this happens again in this setting, this will happen. The gratitude I feel for this particular work is about the practicality of in every moment that I have power. So just that piece around my own self-aggression and being able to notice when it's happening and just have awareness as a starting place and then be able to bring love and kindness to my own self-aggression has been pretty transformative.
Yeah, same for me. So, I know you joined one of the groups. That's what you've been doing for the last couple of years. So, can you speak a little bit about what it's like to be with other parents and how supportive that is?
Oh, yeah. It is so supportive to hear other parents' stories, but just actually having fellowship in the sense of not being alone and that it's okay to talk about without like having a sort of safe space where you're saying like, yep, we are all experiencing this and you're sharing about your experience as a parent for nobody to be pretending. And I think that's been a really hard thing for me to not always just want to say what's going well and to be able to really go into what is difficult and be with that. It sometimes felt like a lifeline, of just getting to be heard and hear.
Yeah. So I'd love to ask you
Yeah.
just one more little thing before we go. And I know this is a huge topic, but I know people have this going on. So I just want to touch on it quickly of how this has affected your partnership. You changing, you doing parenting
Mhm.
this way, because I know when you first started, you were doing it a little bit different.
Well, I think the biggest area has been around my being able to ask for what I need for myself in
Yeah.
my relationship, be present and real and honest, and not make up all of the potential endings. So I think an old way of my working would be I'd really think it through. I'd talk with maybe a therapist and a few friends, talk a situation out, and then say what I need, but with also how I think it should be met, right? Like here's my need, and here's how that's going to look to get my need met by you.
Right.
So kind of prescribing. And so being able to just leave it and communicate in a more short and sweet way, which I mean you could ask my co-parent or my wife if I really achieved that. But at the bottom of it, at the bottom of it inside of me, I certainly have to be able to know, like, here's what I need. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how that's going to manifest. And I can't control what another person's going to feel, think, do, say, but I can keep on returning to my having choice and my having power and agency and taking care of myself.
Mm, it just makes my whole body relax as you say that. It's like the reformation of a
Yeah.
pleaser, right?
Yeah. Although, as you know, it's still a daily,
Yes.
daily relationship with myself. Because, as you said, I think I developed just brilliant strategies as a young one that worked really well for me for a really long time. And I'm grateful for them. And being able to bring consciousness and being an adult and like I still might make a choice to orient towards somebody else's need, but not at the expense of abandoning myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, there was a period last year where you were coaching me to say maybe about everything.
Mm, yeah.
Basically, to really be able to take a little time and slow it down of like, is this a real yes? Is this a real no?
That's what I do with you is just keep reminding you that you also matter, and that your
Mm.
needs are important, and that you can include yourself. It's healthy, it's beautiful, and yes, it's very adult.
Mhm.
What humility, to be able to recognize that, because pleasers, we get a lot of strokes in the culture. Right?
Right.
It looks good. Nice girls. Oh, you're a nice girl and you're a mean boy. And so it takes such humility to express just what you said, to realize, oh, wow, my strategy is just as, maybe abandoning and rejecting of myself as I project out that the anger or the aggression is.
And that's why I will continue to do this work with you and continue to be in a parenting group, because I feel like, for my weekly call, it is just like stopping at the gas station and getting a little bit of fuel. And even on a week where I think if things are going great and other things are on my mind, it is space carved out that keeps me oriented towards my values and my desire to be in relationship, to be in a real relationship with my child.
So I really, really, really deeply appreciate you being here and sharing your story. And it just touches me because I'm a good old Southern pleasing girl myself. So
Mm.
thank you so much for being here with me, love.
Thank you so much for doing this work. I can't say enough how grateful I am for myself and also for the constellation of my family, for the support that we've all been able to get.
If you're listening and would like to download a free copy of the Safe Seat PDF, you can do that on my website at www.purejoyparenting.com. There's also information there on the Pure Joy care groups, and would love to have you join us and dive deeper and deeper in love with yourself. Thank you to Maryrose for sharing her amazing journey towards self-love. Parenting Paused is produced by Kim Paletti at Sound Mind Productions. Music by Jan Perchik. You can find the show notes at www.purejoyparenting.com, where you'll get access to the foundational practice of Pure Joy, the Safe Seat, and find links to relevant topics, as well as a transcription of the show. And if this work inspires you and you would like to practice, come join us in my free Pure Joy Parenting Practice group. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for being here today and listening to the Parenting Pause podcast, your partner and support in finding the joy in yourself and with your children. And remember, if you're about to scream, pause.